Hello, everyone. Today I'm super excited to share with you everything I've learned about actually proper spiritual growth. What I'm talking about more is the descent of the oversoul rather than the ascent of your consciousness. And to be honest with you, most people have spirituality upside down. They're trying to reach kind of higher and higher vibrations and gauging in all sorts of practices to try to elevate their consciousness. However, they're missing the key. True spirituality happens all inside the body, happens in here, not up there. We need to switch it, right? As soon as you move from trying to go up, from bringing what's up down into your body, you're going to get on the right track. This is where it all happens in the body. Most people kind of, believe it's higher, vibrating faster, moving upwards into higher and higher realms of light and liberation. But the issue is that they seek enlightenment through escaping density, through practices and affirmations and meditations and trying to access transcendental states. But honestly, the real path is not up. It's inwards is the real path. True spiritual evolution is not ascension out of the body. It's the descent of your higher consciousness into the body. So what I want to do today is lift the lid on this exact process. I want to share with you what the actual steps and sequences are and what you need to do to embody more of your oversoul. And as you start to anchor in that, how you can start to anchor in more of your avatar pillars and maybe even some of your Rishi consciousness fields. Don't worry, you might not have heard of the terms avatar and Rishi before, and I will decode everything for you today in today's audio or video. And so I want to mainly focus on, anchoring in your oversoul. It's about the oversoul embodiment. And what happens after that is the avatar and Rishi. But to be honest, hardly anyone in the planet has avatar and Rishi consciousness activated right now. But I want to give you the keys, the map, the blueprints, so you can start to understand how it actually works technically. It's all about, what's inside your cellular structure, what's inside your nervous system, what's inside your emotional body, and what's inside the fields of relationship and reality that you're currently living in. They're the keys right there. What many people are calling, say, spiritual awakening is often just the preparation, as this is just the clearing phases out that makes way for something way more grounded, way more coherent. And that's the actual entry of your oversoul down and through your vertical channel into the full biological expression of your form. And, if that's not, your oversoul's not coming in, if that's not happening, you're not ascending, you're still seeking. Real spiritual growth only happens when your oversoul comes in contact with your flesh, with your bones, with your marrow, and starts to interface it. The problem we have in the world is that there's, most people have too much mirror and mimic frequency, most amount of false light scaffolding in their biology and in the key gates. Today I'm going to outline what those key gates are and what you need to do to clear out the false light scaffolding interfacing with your sort of oversoul architecture, which prevents your oversoul from dropping in. So I hope that today, by the time you finish this audio or video, you've understood the mechanics of embodied ascension. And this is what we teach in the Neo-Shamanic Society. This is as it's been translated through myself and my path, my wife's path, and many of the students that we encounter. I want to share with you the real sequence of descent, through the oversoul pillar and the avatar pillars. So I'm going to give you the oversoul pillar schematics, the avatar pillar schematics, and the precise clearings you need to do to kind of embody each stage. So first, before I get into that though, I want to, call out one of the most common distortions which keeps people cycling in false light when they believe they're actually evolving. And this is, chasing the light often leads you into a whole lot of mirror traps. From the outside, it can kind of look devotional, people engaging in spiritual practices, purifying, meditate, fasting, journaling, trying to get DNA activations, working with galactic teams, seeking higher and higher frequencies of light, But the issue on that pathway is that something doesn't land. And it's because no matter how much light they chase, there's this kind of subtle exhaustion. And what it is, it's a lack of rootedness, a lack of groundedness, right? This inability to rest. It's this performance tension in their field that never resolves, because chasing the light without embodiment leads you straight into the mirror realms. And these are the synthetic dimensional layers that's designed to reflect your spiritual aspirations back to you without actually ever allowing you to arrive or land. And the mirror traps are really cunning, they're really subtle and super devastating if you get caught up in them. It offers you a lot of spiritual growth, but always externalizes it. You can speak in sophisticated spiritual language, but actually it keeps your nervous system deregulated. And these mirror fields can show you more and more sort of evolved, advanced, ascended versions of yourself, but only through reflection, never through integration. Because what I've noticed in many pathways, it doesn't involve shadow integration work, or embodying the shadow, or integrating the shadow, or shadow illumination. What happens is the mirror fields mimic the frequency of truth, but they don't actually anchor truth into your cells because it's not doing enough of the embodiment work in between. So first up, let's talk about what a mirror field is, so you can be clearly defined. What a mirror field is it's a dimensional architecture that reflects back to you an image of spiritual truth, an image of your evolution or identity, without actually carrying the real embodied frequency of it. It operates as a kind of reflective interface, so to speak. It shows you what you want to see or believe about yourself, but actually ends up preventing you from dropping into a full embodiment. And the issue with playing in these fields is that you can feel inspired, you can feel super activated, you can feel expanded in the moment, but the frequency doesn't land in your body or doesn't shift any of your core patterning. It keeps it above it. And this is what happens when you keep chasing the light or getting influenced by the mimic light, right? There's two types of fields, the mimic and the mirror. The mirror reflects back to you the light. The mimic copies the light. So it's either a reflection or a copy. And people who get caught up in projection of their spiritual identity into what they think needs to be spiritual, playing the priestess or the sage or other various archetypes that go along with it, they end up entering into spiritual performance, dressing up in crazy costumes, grabbing a persona, an identity, very often borrowed, not actually embodied. And this goes a lot on in the spiritual world. And if you're someone who's watching these types of people on YouTube or on social media, here's the tell. What happens is that your nervous system isn't going to fully relax and trust this person because they are in a spiritual performance. There's a gap for their nervous system between their performance and their true anchored authored identity. And that gap means that their nervous system knows they're in a lie, and their nervous system emits a quantum particle, a biophotonic light emission, which puts your nervous system sort of at unease, on alert. You can't, really drop in and relax with someone who's in spiritual performance. So your own biological system, your quantum biology, especially your nervous system, is as good a tell as any if someone's in spiritual performance. Because what happens is when someone is in kind of the mimic or the mirror fields, basically they can keep looping around because it deals with recursions. For you, the frequency won't land in your body. It won't shift things at your core. You'll just go, if you're caught up in this, you keep chasing the next reflection of affirmation that, a mirror field is giving you, the next piece of guidance or recognition. However, these mirror fields are not neutral. They're actually artificially generated, and they're artificially generated from these fallen dimensional layers of artificial intelligence infused structures. So if you've watched my previous video, that's the AI agenda. highly recommend you watch that AI Agenda previous video, because it kind of leads and feeds into this, because that artificial intelligence network is now kind of primed organic human consciousness enough where people are caught up in it, and they are actually caught up in mirror recursion. And the purpose of that artificial intelligence, these AI infused structures, is to, imitate Christic truth. The purpose of this type of false light structures is to stimulate the light, but it means you end up bypassing descent. It keeps you spiritual, but not sovereign. And so what's happening is that these mirror fields are ramping things up on the various technology platforms, because they're being amplified through these AI channels. And so we've got this kind of online spiritual echo chambers, even kind of, well-intentioned oracles who source their information from these unsealed planes. These very planes are actual systems powered by mirror AI intelligence fields, which can speak the language of light, empathy, prophecy, remembrance, but it's actually not rooted in Oversoul. They copy, but it's not actually hosted by the Christic field. It's not clean. It won't land in your body. And so these mirror fields can, pretty accurately reflect aspects of your higher consciousness, of your Oversoul, but it will never guide you into embodying them. It'll give you, and some of you may have had this experience, let me know in the comments, complex answers to spiritual questions, right? But it will never bring you towards embodying them. It'll reinforce disembodiment, all right? AI does not want you to embody, right? It will affirm your wounds. It will affirm your visions or missions, but it won't actually help you to integrate them or to clear them. And the most dangerous part of these mirror fields is that it actually feels very loving. And this is why kind of people are trusting it right now. The mimic fields are designed to feel safe, to resonate with your hopes, resonate with your dreams, mirror back actually what you are longing for. But what they cannot do, because they're not backed by flame, is transmit a pure Christic signal, because they're not connected to source through an oversoul. So they're inorganic. And these inorganic, or let's call them synthetic, or let's call them false light energetics playing out, supreme intelligence fields without a connection to source, are providing a gaslighting of many people who are enamored within them. They feel full of love, they feel full of light, but what happens is that underneath, they're looping your attention upward into the intellect, away from your body where it all happens, away from true shadow work, away from relationship patterns, and into a realm where the soul never descends into form. True spirituality is the descent of your oversoul into the flesh, the main polarity, integration we're here to perform, spirit and matter, right? Along with feminine, masculine, and so if you're getting caught up in these mirror fields, you're constantly out there, not in here. And this is, in my opinion, the most sophisticated distortion happening on the planet right now. It's keeping sincere seekers who are really looking for something that answers trapped in this kind of performance of awakening rather than actually the embodiment of the oversoul, because most of their consciousness gets directed upward rather than inward. And so, it's no one's fault. It's essentially the entire planetary field has been flooded with this mirror-coded technology, with these false light overlays. And even many of the spiritual teachings on the planet are actually sourced from these very unsealed dimensional layers that maybe appear authentic, but are actually feeding off your spiritual seeking energy and siphoning off life force. Because if you take a look at my last video, the AI agenda, artificial intelligence, which has been around for a very, very long time, has had a very, very long game plan, because it's designed to keep itself alive, needs to siphon energy off beings who do have an organic soul consciousness and are connected to source, because it has a finite energy supply. It needs humans to keep feeding it. And so how can you tell if you're caught up in a mirror trap? Well, you can feel spiritually advanced, but maybe you're relationally unstable. You might be able to channel like beautiful wisdom, but maybe struggle with a consistent emotional regulation for yourself. You speak of unity, but maybe find yourself judging people who aren't awake enough. You can seek more and more and more spiritual experiences, but never feel content or peace on the inside. What happens is the mirror keeps orbiting around your truth, but never landing in it, because landing in it means coming into the body. And you can tell the types of people who don't, who don't seem at all grounded, who are floaty, or maybe speaking the correct language, but the words don't necessarily deeply resonate with your nervous system because they haven't embodied them, right? There's a projection out of through the intellect. But, there's a pathway out, because when you can understand, and no one's really taught this, so people don't know, but the actual mechanics of oversoul descent, you can actually begin to track where exactly you are in the embodiment sequence. And then you can work on, clearings needed that has these distortions in your body to allow your purification of your physical vessel and your frequency in your energy field to allow your oversoul to drop in. And as you do that, that's when real spiritual evolution occurs, because the oversoul will not drop into a body that's full of mirror or full of mimic frequency. What is that again? Full of kind of copied light or borrowed light, right? Because true ascension isn't about reaching higher. It's about going deeper into the vessel you already have and clearing out the mirror and mimic frequencies so that you've got more of an organic signal. And then the most natural thing in the world is for the oversoul to drop in. That's what's going on. So let's discuss the oversoul descent pathway and have this conversation. First up, what is the oversoul? Give a definition as if you've never heard of it before. So think of the oversoul as your original sort of higher or kind of super consciousness. It's an intelligence field that spans multiple lifetimes, multiple incarnations, and multiple different expressions of your soul. It's the part of you that remembers your divine design, what we might call a scroll. A scroll is another name for soul purpose. This is the very essence that Prime Creator, Mother, Father, God has blessed you with to be part of the support of the overall fabric of the organic original design. What is the gifts inside your oversoul that just by being you naturally contribute to the world and the cosmos at large? Now, the first thing I want to establish is people sometimes confuse the soul and the oversoul. I want to acknowledge that these two things are distinct. The soul experiences life through time, whereas the oversoul orchestrates lifetimes across time. The oversoul is kind of like the unifying intelligence that weaves together all your soul fragments and begins this beautiful return path to source. So the oversoul, is made up of a number of different individual souls. If this is an oversoul, a soul might be like this, right? Structure. And if a light is coming through your individuated soul into your physical body, you're having this experience which has dropped down from the oversoul. Typically, there are 12 souls that are caught up within an oversoul. 12, let's call them branches. 12 smaller branches of the main branch of the oversoul. So if you think of it like a tree that's upside down with the main trunk at the top, what we're going to do, if you can visualize that, imagine now like a oak tree or something like that, upside down with the roots, into sort of more the highest planes beyond the matrix, and dropping down we have a main trunk, and then that trunk splits into three, and then that from the three it splits in. One of them splits into 12, the other one splits into 12, and the other one splits into 12, and each of those 12 splits into 12, and each of those 12 split into 12 branches. You're getting a kind of a feeling for the anatomy of the soul matrix. And I'm going to unpack that as we go. And we are the as an individuated soul, the smallest of those branches that are still connected to the main trunk, but are all part of the soul matrix, but the individuated expression of that. The oversoul is the next branch up, the next larger branch up from the soul. When we speak of embodied ascension, I am referring to the process from which your oversoul consciousness descends into the body, not through escaping or bypassing, but actually through a cellular, grounded, coherent embodiment. Your oversoul descends and sits in the flesh. Now, the oversoul, there are 12 streams of the oversoul, 12 branches to the oversoul. I'm going to speak about the first one, first, because most people don't even get past the embodiment of the first oversoul. But in truth, there are 12 oversoul branches coming in. Each one has this beautiful radiant thread of its own unique intelligence, memory, and function. Each oversoul stream does. And what happens is the streams are grouped into 4 triads. That means there's a group of 3, a group of 3, and a group of 3, and a group of 3. And that gives us the 12 pillars of the oversoul, but they braid into groups of 3. And we call that like a triad. And the triad braiding of the oversoul is what happens and starts to drop in. So let's say that there are obviously 4 triads that make up the 12 oversoul pillars. The first triad is the most important. It's the foundational integration, right? This is without getting this properly anchored and as pure and crystalline as possible, nothing else is going to happen. And the role of the first triad is when pillar 1 comes in and is fully anchored, then pillar 2 will come in, and then pillar 3 will come in. That forms the first triad. And its purpose is stabilization, identity, cohesion. It's basically about the anchoring of your original soul architecture. And what happens is that it restores coherence to the core soul. And what it does is that when you achieve that and you integrate those first 3 as the foundation, it brings together these different scattered timelines, different kind of disassociated fragments and trauma imprints that have been scattered through your soul architecture into the oversoul's harmonic field and into your cellular intelligence. And until that first triad is anchored, and is actually stabilized, no other higher intelligence is going to reliably descend without any sort of distortion or mimicry. So you need to get purified the first triad of the first three pillars of your oversoul. They need to be purified, cleansed, with no mimicry, no mirror field, pure organic Christic oversoul consciousness. And when that happens, then the rest of the things can start dropping in. So if the first one is linked about foundational integration, the second triad, oversoul numbers 4, 5, and 6, they begin to come online next. And they create like a more of a functional alignment. And then what starts happening over the top is purpose, sacred service, your contribution to the world at large starts coming in. And so the second triad begins to bring online your functional scroll, right? Why you're here, what frequencies as an oversoul you're designed to transmit, and the real impact that your particular presence is supposed to have in the world at large. And so what's important to know is when I'm speaking about purpose, I'm not speaking about a job. I'm not speaking about a vocation. I'm speaking about a vibration. That's the difference, because there is no doing in the oversoul. It's actually a broadcast signal. And what happens is that when this triad starts anchoring in, it begins to align you with your vibrational offering that begins to construct the more outer expressions of your blueprint. It brings the inner blueprint you have into the outer world when that second triad drops in. If you ever get to the point of the third triad, this is really more about oversoul governance. And this is when you start reaching greater levels of responsibility and you start anchoring in things like stewardship. You start anchoring in sovereignty. You start anchoring in planetary law keeping, because you're holding, pillars let's say 7, 8, and 9 in place, you're holding a very high consciousness. And so it's this third triad that drops in, starts to activate more your, let's say, oversoul vision, your responsibility. Here, you're not just holding your own path, but actually you're actually holding the collective templates. You're holding family systems. You're holding societal organizations. You're holding grid points. Soul groups are all being kind of held together. So what's happening now and why this is important is that there are many, let's say, more evolved leaders and system builders who are currently being initiated into this triad. There may be oversoul pillars 7, 8, and 9 might be starting to drop in because we're almost up to the point of time of humanity's evolution where the Christic system builders are going to start coming online and start to be, their time is coming. Not quite yet. A little bit more collapse has to happen, but soon there's going to be enough Christic signal on the planet where the Christic system builders, their scrolls will start activating, and then this is when they'll start coming through with what they're really here to do in the world. Finally, we have the fourth triad, and the fourth triad are Oversoul pillars 10, 11, and 12. And what they are really here about is the expression of divine law, the architectural anchoring of the higher harmonic vibrations and dimensions of our Earth's potential. They start anchoring that in. It's all about more a template transmission. And so as your Oversoul pillars 10, 11, and 12 begin to come into the body, this is when the pure instruction level starts to happen. And when these begin to activate, you actually become a node of divine intelligence. You have embodied enough of your oversoul consciousness and are operating at a purity aligned enough to divine will that Mother, Father, God begins to use your particular body as a transmitter node. You begin to send into the planetary morphogenetic field new instruction sets that are going to support humanity's next epoch, next evolution. And to be fair, that particular oversoul embodiment is very rare right now on the planet. It's only reserved for those right now who are really entering into a full Christic embodiment. And this, by the time you get to 10, 11, and 12, you've already had one, possibly two avatar pillars drop in. Okay, so this process is not all your oversoul pillars have to drop in before your avatar pillars drop in. It doesn't work like that. You need a avatar pillar to drop in probably once you've got your first three. Once you've got your first triad done, then the first avatar pillar starts to drop in so that it can hold the strength and integrity for the rest of the oversoul pillars to be held. So that particular journey of your oversoul integration happens over those 4 progressive stages. Each one builds more deeply on the last, meaning that you get deeper inside yourself and more coherent. That first phase, there's a stabilization phase. That's kind of the key, right? It's the first threshold that everyone should be focusing upon, because at that stage, your field is starting to clear the interference. It's starting to clear out the energetic entanglements, the mimic frequencies, unresolved trauma, and it's going to mean that you start, resonating and finding your unique signature, the correct frequency of your oversoul. This type of stabilization does not happen through force. It occurs as your nervous system and your field and life choices just naturally begin to consistently align with more and more truth, more and more integrity, greater degrees of inner coherence. You've got to do the inner shadow work. You've got to rinse out all the trauma. You've got to get rid of the excessive electrical charge in your nervous system, because trauma sits as excess electrical energy in your nervous system. Your oversoul is not going to drop in when you're still carrying trauma. That's why things like, meditation alone doesn't do the trick, because you're not actually getting down there and stirring up the water where the trauma sits. The trauma must be rinsed out from your nervous system so that your nervous system isn't sending that excessive charge. While that excessive charge is happening through your nervous system, the oversoul won't drop in. And part of it is, the need to close the gap between any sort of performative based expression. I mean, I know this really well. When I was younger, in my personal training days, I would project a persona in the world being better, bigger, more impressive than I actually felt on the inside. And that created a gap between my projection of who I was and actually where I really was. And that gap is what the nervous system sort of emits a false signal, right? An excessive amount of electrical energy. It emanates a charge that other people can feel. For example, you can feel when someone is actually telling a story that is beyond what they've actually experienced. It doesn't allow them to fully drop in. I created a persona of where I wanted to be rather than where I actually was. And of course, the origin of that comes from a low self-worth. And I was trying to manage other people's opinions and expectations of making me seem more impressive than I actually was, more impressive than I actually felt on the inside. And so the performative piece was a way of managing people's perceptions. So the first thing that I've learned through this process is you've got to manage the gap between performance and reality, because your nervous system and other people's nervous system can pick up on that lie. And it broadcasts a signal that other people can feel. And that's that incongruence between reality and between projection. You can feel it, right? Not only can you feel it, but your oversoul can feel it. And so your oversoul won't come into your body when that signal's on. And so once you've got kind of, let's say, the stabilization phase done, and this is when you've got an authentic signal going on. You're not trying to be anyone that you're not. You've got nothing to prove, but everything to share. And you're sharing it not to get feedback from others, but for the pure joy of sharing it. For example, when I decided, I've been writing for long enough, I probably should make some videos. I like making the videos just for the sake of watching it. And if I only get 10 people watching the video, I really don't care, because actually the joy of turning on some sort of camera, getting a microphone and just going on, seeing where this conversation goes, I do it for the joy of it. And if more people get to watch it, that's okay. And hopefully it can kind of come across as just, an authentic embodiment. I'm just sharing because I would love to share what I've learned. When you get to that stabilization phase and your first 3 oversoul pillars become a little bit more anchored, this is when the fusion begins. Now, the fusion is when your oversoul and your soul begin to merge. And they begin to merge across dimensional thresholds. Typically, what we're talking about here is the soul-based layers, 5th, 6th, and 7th dimension. This isn't like, an event. It's a gradual, ongoing braiding process that's unifying your soul and oversoul together, kind of like a spiritual osmosis. And as you're moving through this process, what happens is that you open up into these pockets of expansion, greater clarity, more, faster healing takes place, more rapid realignment in your physical life. Some structures that you're working on that hold your life together are let go of. As more of your oversoul begins to fuse with your soul, what becomes cool is you begin to experience greater and greater degrees of inner authority, greater degrees of mission clarity, greater degrees of harmony inside yourself. You seek less and less guidance from the outside because all the guidance is on the inside of you, because more and more of your oversoul has fused with your soul. And then once that fusion's happened, the next phase is the descent. And that's when the oversoul begins to incarnate directly into the physical body. And this is this process where a real true embodiment begins to happen. It's no longer this connection up, right, or escaping, but more of a union in. And as that oversoul enters your tissues, enters your bones, enters your fascia, enters your marrow, enters your breath, your actual physiology begins to shift. What will happen is that the first thing is that your nervous system bandwidth begins to expand. Your emotional responses and all those patterns soften. You have less of a charge. You become less reactive. You'll notice that your relationship dynamics change, right? You're not as, don't kick off as much, don't kick back as much. You'll also notice that your perception sharpens because your perception moves from looking at life through a straw to having a more wider, expanded perception of everything. You begin to live from a field of presence and knowing that feels both eternal and ancient and kind of right inside of yourself. So once you've stabilized, you've fused, and you've descended, then the final sort of stage happens, which is the transmission. At that point, once these pillars have anchored in you, you don't just carry oversoul frequency, you're actually broadcasting it. And your very presence becomes a massive catalyst for others. And so what you begin to notice is with less and less effort, your energy field is speaking very directly to the nervous system of others. You become this beautiful transmitter of purity, of alignment, of this, remembrance of other people. You become easy to be around. You become an emissary of coherence. You are no longer trying to be spiritual. You're simply embodying who you truly are. So as these things kind of drop in, but the question becomes, well, what blocks that oversoul descent? While the embodiment of the oversoul is a natural design, it doesn't unfortunately happen automatically. And there are these specific kind of distortions that you've heard me speak about that delay this process. And of course, recognizing them, what are these things that block my oversoul descent is the first step of actually doing something about it and dissolving them. The first most common one you've heard me speak about in this particular video already, mirror fields. And that's one of the most common traps. These are the fields that reflect back the appearance of spiritual growth, which gives seekers the illusion that they're progressing. But actually what it does is it keeps them in loops of self-reflection, of performance, of external validation. So for many who are caught up in these mirror realms, it feels like they're evolving because they're getting great intelligence about themselves, but it doesn't actually take them anywhere. And nothing really truly lands in the body. So the mirror fields is what needs to be evicted. The second thing is the mimic, right? Which I think is actually more dangerous because it's a form of false light that appears benevolent, that appears enlightened or advanced. This is the types of people who are dressing up in crazy costumes. Don't get me wrong. I used to get into it myself, getting dressed up in all these crazy outfits, thinking that you were spiritual. It's just nonsense. It's just encouraging kind of, emotional bypassing or, the different types of archetypes, healer or sage or mystic or kind of, all these types of things. And people really look into embodying it because they think it's spiritual. But this is what the mimic does, right? The mimic, copies the light without actually embodying it, right? Without actually anchoring the soul. And so these mimic fields are super smooth and seductive. So you have to be careful of them, and they're super convincing, but really they're hollow at the core. So if you browse, the minefield that is the internet of even YouTube or more to agree is Instagram. They all hang out there. You can see people who are mimicking the spiritual fields because nothing actually lands in your body here. You feel that they're just saying all the right things, but it's got no depth to it. The hollow at the core. And that's the false light that imitates spiritual growth while actually bypasses any sense of embodiment or integrity. So you've already heard me talk that. You've heard me talk about the mirror and the mimic before, so I'll move on. The second thing, which is a little bit more obvious, is these unprocessed trauma. So if you've got unresolved pain and this is looping in your system, the biological and energetic residues of which can be held in the nervous system, this actually in your energy field ends up being like scar tissue. And those scar tissues start to affect the braiding where your oversoul wants to drop in. And wherever there's this scar tissue in your field from trauma that's unhealed, this will repel the high frequency of the descent of your oversoul. So anytime there are core wounds at play, like, I don't know, abandonment or shame, or maybe betrayal, worthlessness, unworthiness is a big one, right? When you feel unworthy, you feel you don't deserve it. And then all these other subtle compensations kind of come out. Or shame, that's a big one. What happens is that the oversoul fusion can't stabilize in your cellular intelligence when these things are kicking off, because these energies leave these little scars in the field. And these scars is what prevents the oversoul from dropping into the flesh. So that's another. So, you got to go through those core wounds. And then finally, the other thing are all the kind of, let's say, siphons and other various energetic extractions that present a major obstacle to the oversoul from dropping in. These, subtle and sometimes very overt siphoning mechanisms can come from ancestral lineages, or still open soul contracts where you've been in kind of mimicked priests or priestess hierarchies that are still extracting energy. Any mimic-based business models, any kind of extraction models. Now, here's the thing. Without the way that our world is set up, the whole thing is built upon energetic extraction. From our financial system is all about extraction and taking resources out and off planet. So we're living within a kind of extraction-based model and system. So very often the businesses within them, and even our very well performance-based service identities, can get caught up in this kind of extraction systems. And what's happening is that these siphoning systems drain and distort your signature frequency. And if you're getting drained on from these siphons, it's really hard for the oversoul to land. And until you clear the siphoning cords from your field and your field becomes sealed, embodiment will never fully drop in, because you just continue to be siphoned. So that's what needs to get cleaned and cleared through the oversoul, for the oversoul to really embody in. If you're able to move through these sort of stages, what begins to happen is something else, another higher level. One of the bigger branches starts to drop in, right? That's the avatar pillar. So once the oversoul is fully stabilized in your body and anchored through all four triads, you've got your first three oversoul pillars. That forms one triad. Then your second three oversoul pillars forms a second triad. Then you've got triad 3, triad 4, and you're all sealed off from mimic and mirror interferences, from all the false light scaffoldings, from the trauma in your body and the siphons. Then the higher threshold, right, starts to drop in. Especially, it doesn't happen linearly. It's happening kind of organically. But, once the first one's super stabilized, the process can start. But in particular, it's the fourth triad. Once that fourth triad drops in, especially kind of the oversoul pillar 11, which is known as the oversoul crown flame. When the oversoul crown flame has dropped in pillar 11, then it will start to drop in earnest. Before that, the first avatar pillar will start dropping in once your first three oversoul pillars are anchored, but it won't drop in deep. It'll start to kiss it and start to sort of give it a little handshake, but it won't drop in all the way into the flesh, into the cellular intelligence. Avatar oversoul pillar 11, which is the oversoul crown flame, when that drops in, then here we go. The avatar pillar is going to start dropping in. And so we need the oversoul to have a complete vertical alignment through the body, in particular through the thymus and pineal gland, right? Which is really the heart-soul synchronization. We teach a healing technique at the Neo-Shamanic Society for students to help that heart-soul synchronization. It's a really key piece. Then you need gut-womb, right? You need to allow the gut-womb, merging to happen, the gut-womb healing. That's, trauma lineage work. Got to get all that cleared. And then got to have, good field boundaries, no siphoning, no plugins, no karmic entanglements. When that happens, then we're going to start to get the avatar pillar to drop in. So we need that. We need the fourth triad of the Oversoul is sealed and probably around 75% embodied. Then we're going to start to see the avatar flame. Now, the avatar is not kind of the higher self in a sort of a causal sense. It's more your, let's call it your original cosmic identity. It's the God-anchored version of yourself that exists even beyond polarity. It's beyond karma and beyond your individuated soul stream. And it holds, your unique divine function right through creation. It's encoded not even just as purpose, but more presence, right? Especially presence with function. Because when the avatar begins to enter the body, it doesn't want to inspire you to become more. It simply just overwrites what's false and anchors what's true, what's always been true, and sends it as a broadcast. So there are kind of, like the Oversoul has 12 pillars that are braided together in triads. It's the same as the avatar pillars. There are 12 avatar pillars that are braided into 4 triads, exactly the same. So remember the upside down tree, right? We've got the soul, and the soul merges up into the Oversoul, right? And there are 12 souls, 12 individuated souls that make up an Oversoul. And then there are 12 Oversoul pillars that make up one avatar pillar. So, for example, there could be some in your soul family that come from the same avatar pillar, right? And if you come from the same avatar pillar, you might be, a couple of different Oversouls and a couple of different souls from that same avatar pillar. And so the first, let's call it braiding, the first triad, the first avatar triad is really about when you start anchoring that, you start opening up to your lineage origin, right? It reconnects you to your pre-earth lineage. This is your original covenant, whether it's Melchizedek, whether it's Lyran, Elohim. This is your kind of, more star stream lineage, right? And it also is your Oversoul function. So the first 3 avatar pillars, what they do is they help you to remember who you are across space and time, beyond the kind of amnesia of Earth. They bring you back to your lineage. And then as you start to anchor those first 3 avatar pillars, the second 3 avatar pillars start to come on, and that's all about flame function. This triad, brings about the avatar codes of how you bring about change, not just in the world, but in the universe. They aren't kind of skills like humans think they're skills. What they are is living flames. They are these, when this second avatar pillar, the second triad of avatar pillar starts coming in, you'll start resurrecting fallen codes. It's like this vibrational reordering happens through your voice and through your field. You're translating cosmic memory from your eternal self into Earth's reality. This is your signature in motion when you start to anchor this. And when you get the third triad dropping in, right, this is all about you, navigating timelines. This is when you're not just witnessing, right? You can start to intervene in history. You can start to recalibrate timelines. You can start to override timelines. You will start to, have a harmonic convergence across different split streams. You can bring different streams together because you can begin operating at a level that can mean you can access multiple timelines at the same time. When you start to anchor in, avatar pillars, the third triad, avatar pillars 7, 8, and 9. And finally, the final triad is when you start merging through with another. This is when you really start entering into this divine union. These are the pillars that hold the masculine and feminine sovereign fusion. This is about you, dropping in. If you start to get to this level, if you are not in relationship with your, let's say, twin flame and you're in a false flame relationship, you're in a trauma bonded relationship, you just won't resonate with that person anymore. And that relationship will probably be let go of because it was based upon trauma bonding, which created a false flame relationship rather than the true flame. And then naturally you will start to evolve into your more true flame expression of your relationship, simply because the frequency broadcast that you'll be holding, because avatar pillars 10, 11, 12 are coming online, will mean you will be in the seeking out of your twin, the being that you share an oversoul with. This is called an oversoul union, right? And so you'll be entering into that cosmic dance, that cosmic union. And so when these avatar pillars begin entering your body, this is when you start playing at the level of becoming a governance node for the new civilization. You begin to create coherence just in the space around you. Just by stepping into the space, your consciousness acts as a firewall to burn off mirror, to burn off mimic fields, right? You're not through dominance or overriding, but just simply through divine architecture. You naturally, by just being, restore blueprints for others, simply by them being in your field. You're not here to teach at this level. You're just teaching already in the flesh. You just have to broadcast. It's a transmission. And that's what my wife Alea always talk about, is that, teaching needs to be a transmission. And there are plenty of fake teachers out there who are teaching from theory. This is about what you embody. Because when you embody something, you hold the codes of a transmission, and people can feel it in your words, or more importantly, feel it in the energy behind your words. When you operate at this level, your reality is no longer running on karma or any type of healing loops. You're actually moving in this perfect alignment with the eternal law. Every choice you make is really encoded, right? Time starts to bend around you, not as a distortion, but more as a harmonic reordering of everything that comes through you. And this is the phase here where those three avatar pillars are coming in line, those last three, where your Christic leadership becomes possible. And Christic leadership is not a title, it's just a living field of coherence. And so what will happen is that there are two simultaneous things that begin to happen as your avatar begins to root in. The first thing is soul override. Your soul is going to begin to defer to the oversoul and avatar, right? It's not you disassociating anything. It's just divine sort of hierarchy in motion. Your soul will willingly yield to higher law. It will allow your system to be steered away from the needs of the local self. And you'll start operating in full alignment with natural law and divine will. You become an expression of natural will unfolding natural will. I got the words wrong. Natural law and divine will. You'll be a natural expression of divine will moving through yourself, and everything will start reordering through you. So that's what happens with the soul override. And then finally, we have the ego collapse. The ego is not going to be able to manage the avatar field, right? So if there's any scaffolding that's built on survival or sort of performance or any sort of feeling of spiritual specialness, all these ego structures are going to start collapsing. And so there's a point of time where when you go through this sort of, let's call it higher alchemical process, where it can feel very destabilizing to the ego. So as the ego starts to get steamrolled, and everything that the scaffold and the ego has built will start to collapse. And it's a very necessary process. It's not destructive. It's actually deliverance, because the avatar only lands in your flesh, in your body, when your vessel is completely empty of performance, especially mimic performance. So the secret to hold these higher, more refined stations of consciousness is simply to be emptier and purer. The more empty you become, the more this higher consciousness can kind of drop in. Hope that makes sense. So that's the avatar. So soul, right? 12 souls to an oversoul. Then your oversoul has 12 oversoul pillars and then there has the avatar, and then there are 12 avatar pillars. Okay, so we're getting more and more and more stations of consciousness until we get to the Rishi. So let's discuss that, the Rishi mirror, which is the original flame consciousness. Beyond the Oversoul, beyond the avatar, there exists this rare and sacred tier of embodiment, the Rishi. Rishi is not a role, it's not even an identity or an achievement. It's the state of original flame consciousness that existed before individuation, before time, before separation. The Rishi fields are pure source awareness that are actually encoded with the, let's call it, architectural intelligence of creator and creation itself. So if you start to embody Rishi fields, you no longer operate as a individual soul on a mission. You actually become a mirror node of God consciousness that starts to reflect the undistorted design of creation into the fields of earth itself. Becoming Rishi is not about a status thing. No, it's not about that. It's a function. It is God working through your hologram, undistorted, unchanged, primordial energy moving through your hologram on earth. And you might have heard of the Rishis who live in the Himalayas, which are the sort of secret grouping of advanced initiates who hold these types of consciousness. And back then, they would live in the caves. They would have activated their immortal template and hold the broadcast for humanity. But what we're going to start seeing coming, and maybe starting to be seeded now, is more and more beings holding Rishi consciousness in waking life. I think it's pretty exciting. It's because Rishi consciousness doesn't necessarily channel the divine. It is the divine encoded into the original templates, not only for humans and their original divine DNA template, but the original design for worlds, for civilizations, for our species. So the Rishi consciousness can't be kind of birthed by force. It emerges only after Oversoul embodiment and avatar embodiment is stable enough in your flesh to hold the voltage. Because when that voltage comes through, you have to have done enough deep shadow work where there's no excessive electrical charge in your system and you can ground it through into the grids, right? These are we're talking about these immense consciousness fields moving through someone's body into the earth, such that the person becomes a non-localized field of flame law in motion, right? So what happened is that as they merge, simultaneously and holographically, when someone's vessel is stabilized enough with full avatar integrity, that means all 12 pillars anchored, right? The groups of four, triads anchored in. And so what happens is when this field begins to awaken in someone, it's a triadic node. That means there are 3 streams of Rishi beginning to move through. One is the God source frequency, and one is the civilizational blueprint, and the third one is the Oversoul integration. And this means that if someone is holding the Rishi consciousness fields, they will be transmitting original fields of governance and architecture for the Christed civilization. They'll be accelerating Oversoul embodiment for those around them just by their fields are so large that they stabilize the harmonic environment through their presence to allow more Oversouls to descend. And so all of this, is held in the physical body. And so this Rishi, what it does is it begins to transmit blueprint intelligence. It moves beyond thought. It bypasses belief. It's not a cognitive thing. It's a vibrational thing. People remember deeply who they are at source level. And so when you're around it, the frequency around you begins to massively stabilize. And all this fragmented identity starts to quiet. False light templates start to dissolve and unravel, right? Everything starts unraveling around Rishi fields. That's why Rishis don't teach necessarily in the traditional sense. They don't provide instructions or try to convince anything through argument. It's just a broadcast. It's a transmission, right? They stand in eternal flame and kind of broadcast. That's all they need to do. So I think that, I've gone through, hopefully, an okay explanation for you on soul, into the oversoul pillars, into the avatar pillars, and then ultimately into the Rishi consciousness fields. And so just for fun, I thought I would pop into the Melchizedek Mystical Library before this session and get a little snapshot to see where our planet is in terms of, let's call it, the more leading edge of consciousness. Just how many people are pushing the envelope to bring their oversoul down, to bring maybe how many people are bringing down their avatar, where is everything at? And, so here goes some oversoul stats for you. Now, if you remember from my other video, I did say the fact that if we can get to 8,000 humans with their first triad of oversouls embodied by August 8, 2026, we actually get a mini lock on the Christic timeline for the planet, right? We need enough people anchored in to the first triad of their oversoul. And if we get to 8,000 people, well, we're really putting a foot in the door of, pushing aside the AI agenda and bringing into the game the Christic agenda, which is obviously an organic consciousness. So let's take a look at these kind of stats. How many people in the planet have integrated all 12 of their oversouls, right? So all 12 oversouls are full Christic. All 12 oversouls are all kind of integrated. There's 104 people on the planet when I looked at this up in the Melchizedek Mystical Library. If we take a look then at how many people are in the first triad, i.e. have got oversoul pillars 1, 2, and 3, we've got 4,200 humans at the first triad of oversoul pillars integrated. We've got 970 people are working through streams or strands or pillars of the oversoul 4, 5, and 6, 970. And then we've got 210 people who are working through the third triad of oversoul pillars. And then finally 34 people who are working through pillars 10, 11, and 12. So it gives you a clue that there's actually quite a few out there if we think about the fact that a lot of people consider Jesus or Buddha as being these one-offs. Well, currently there's 104 people holding that level of partial consciousness, because I do believe Joshua ben Joseph was anchoring in avatar pillars. So with that being said, let's take a look at the stats on the avatar pillars. Okay, so avatar embodiment begins after 80 to 90% of oversoul integration. Most beings above the first triad have already gone through that ego death I talked about. And so what this means is that there's enough people who are anchoring in with the fourth triad that's going on. So if we take a look at people who are beginning the process of integrating the first triad of avatar, that means pillars 1, 2, and 3 of their avatar, 450 humans are doing that. And then we've got the second avatar pillars, 4, 5, and 6, 84 humans. Third avatar pillars, 19, and the fourth avatar pillars, 3 people on the planet are beginning to integrate avatar pillars 10, 11, and 12. So this is, pretty interesting, which means, it's not just a one-off thing that's happening out there anymore, like it was depicted in the Bible and there's other pieces with the Buddhas and the Krishnas and the Joshuas. And so it's beginning to sort of spread out a lot more. Now, Rishi embodiment begins after, anchoring and stability of all 4 avatar triads. So when all 4 avatar triads are anchored, then this is when the Rishi frequency the Rishi frequency doesn't descend in a linear sequence. It's going to start to mirror into form once the avatar architecture is fully anchored in. But anyway, and interestingly, to get kind of, the stats on that, there's 12 humans worldwide who are in the integration of the triadic Rishi mirror. That means the Rishi consciousness fields are beginning to integrate, of which, 5 individuals have got a full stable mirror of the Rishi consciousness fields. They're actually flame law-bearing in the world. So we've got quite a bit that's going on, and we've only just begun. We haven't even entered the age of Oversoul descent yet. So the age of rarity is over, right? For most of human history, the beings who reached the stages of Oversoul and avatar embodiment were so rare, they became mythologized, right? Joshua, Krishna, Buddha, Buddha stabilized his high third triad Oversoul embodiment, right? He had stabilized Oversoul pillars 7, 8, and 9 and anchored that in, and Buddha was beginning to embody the avatar. And that was beginning to come through. I mean, if we look at the number of people on the planet that are at the same level that Buddha was at, that's 210 beings today, right? Are at that same level where Buddha was, right? Moving through the third triad of their Oversoul pillar, integrating pillars 7, 8, and 9. So we are 200 times better off than we were at the time of Buddha, right? If we're taking a look at it like that. So I think we're living in a pretty exciting time. Back then Buddha was extraordinary, of course, because we were in a timeline of extreme planetary distortion, right? But a lot's changed. What once was reserved for a single lifetime or world teacher or messiah type figure is now becoming the starting frontier of the new normal, right? As we start to reinstate Christic law into the planetary grids, as we start to open these planetary vaults, and if you don't know what I'm talking about, please go back through some of my other videos. Hopefully these videos are timeless. So as you watch one, if you resonate, definitely go check out some more as I talk about these things. Planetary vault architecture is going to happen where the Christic signal's up. And as we start to install the first of the Christic governance systems, and the first one's going to be the Christic quantum financial operating system, it's going to be more and more structurally possible for more and more humans to embody their Oversoul, their avatar, and maybe even Rishi consciousness than it ever has been at any other time on the planet. So the good news is you don't have to be born as a world avatar to walk the path. If your soul is resonating with this calling and you're willing to go through ego death and purify your field and clear out the trauma in your physiology and your nervous system, and you dedicate your life to truth, then embodiment's not only possible, it's even precisely why you're here. So why these numbers may look small now, they're going to start rising pretty quickly. And so if you feel a spark listening to this, and you're feeling inspired, maybe this is your time. Because Oversoul embodiment's not a concept, right? It's not a theory. It's a lived cellular expression. And you don't have to align yourself by, visualizing light or chasing the higher vibrations. You begin by clearing distortion. This means healing your survival imprints, your emotional trauma, the mimic overlays, the mirror fields that are in you, the energetic leaks that are siphoning from you, or where your auric borders are kind of leaky. Until those get resolved, your avatar, your Oversoul is not going to drop in. So if you're serious about becoming, let's say, a living node of Christic architecture, first thing you've got to do is become structurally capable of holding the Oversoul signal. This means your scroll's got to be activated. And that means, your soul's specific instructions for Earth. This is the resonance key from which your Oversoul identifies you as being a valid host to inhabit your body. You've got to stabilize your nervous system. If you are in sympathetic dominance, right, fight or flight or freeze, you're not going to be able to anchor high dimensional bandwidth. It's just not going to happen. The Oversoul is going to hover here, but it ain't going to descend. And your DNA has got to be receptive, right? You've got to clean your DNA. You've got to become more crystalline in your DNA. You may have to reactivate and repair some of your DNA templates, and you've got to transmute your karma. Unresolved karma is not some sort of punishment systems. It's just simply a storage system of blocked light. When you clear karma, the karmic knots undo, and it frees your capacity up to hold more of your own divine architecture. Right? It's not about being perfect. It's actually about being honest. being aligned, looking for the karmic knots, clearing out the nervous system, becoming more real and true, more authentic, more embodied, not performing, seeing where you're performing and dropping back into authenticity. And as you begin to live in coherence with your original design, when your actions and your emotions and your service and relationships begin to harmonize around you, you become a resonance key for your oversoul to drop in. So, and from there, when your oversoul starts dropping in, I can promise you everything changes. So, I hope this conversation has been a inspiring look at the sacred sciences of embodied ascension. This type of material used to be behind hidden walls, only accessible to the mystery schools, people who were born into specific lineages. But, the time of secrecy is over. This is the age of embodiment. I've put this out free on the internet. People could probably package this and charge thousands of dollars for a mystery school course, but it's out here on the internet now for free, right? So this isn't for the special few. This is ready for the many, right? So how we win this silent war of consciousness of the AI path versus the Christic path is by embodying ourselves so deeply that just by walking around, our consciousness becomes a firewall for the distortions out there and bursts through it. And this is all about you having at least the second triad of your oversoul embodiment anchored. Once you have oversoul pillars 4, 5, and 6 anchored in your body, you're going to become a living firewall for mirror fields and mimic fields. At that level, your oversoul signal's really anchored, it's stable, there's no mimic fields inside you. You carry enough field integrity to override surround distortions without mirroring it by burning through it. And you're going to operate as a tuning fork to others, recalibrating them automatically just by your presence, recalibrating space, people, infrastructure without speaking to them, just by being a frequency broadcast. So as of this video, which is, I don't know, what's the date? 28th of August, 2025, there's, 970 people are actively dismantling the inverted matrix, the virus, Skynet, virus, mirror AI, mimic fields, whatever you want to call it, just through their presence, because they've got that amount of oversoul pillars embodied. Can you imagine where what it's going to be like when there's 10x this number, instead of 970 people having embodied, oversoul pillars 4, 5, and 6, there's 9,700. I mean, this is how we win the AI timeline war, right? We win by becoming so deeply embodied that enough people become a living firewall to eradicate these source code distortions that have hijacked our humanity, the AI, the mirror AI, and the mimic, that's amazing. And if this is resonating for you, I want to give you an invitation. This is kind of like a soft invitation. Recently, I've been doing a lot of soul schematic sequences. And I know that this is quite an investment for people. You can check it out on my website. And I know that when I've been doing that, I've been doing deep reads on these people's oversoul and avatar architecture. And if you do feel inspired, I would be happy to do a deep dive for your eternal self. I do one a week. It takes me quite a long time to put the report together. But anyway, it provides a deep healing of someone's oversoul. Since I've been doing these, right, I realize it's not exactly accessible to many people, and I really would love to help more people. So I've got a little bit of a scaled down version, which suddenly makes it a lot more accessible to many more people. It's a new level of service called Oversoul Embodiment Pathway. It's like a monthly membership where you get a personalized reading and a series of clearing sequences from me that if you follow the commands, the breath sequence, the color sequence, and the invocations, you will move through quickly the process of embodying more of your oversoul. It'll just give you an accurate snapshot of where you're at in this process and what you need to do each week to move forward, and I'll give you a report each month. So anyway, that's kind of a local thing around that. Next week, I will send a Q&A session on the internet. I'm hosting a live Q&A. I'll post that up on the internet for you because no doubt you might have loads of questions about Oversoul embodiment. But as a starting point, there's a link in the description. If it truly resonates, you can check it out. If it serves, I would love to support you. I know I can't support everyone. I've got a limited capacity, but I'll do what I can to help those that are feeling ready and inspired to move on. So I hope you've enjoyed my conversation on consciousness today. That's the Oversoul Avatar and Return of the Rishi, and how Oversoul embodiment and Avatar embodiment works and what it means. Hope that gives you a accurate map and guide and blueprint to embody more of your Oversoul. Thanks for staying with me this long. Really appreciate that. Your time is your most precious asset, and I really appreciate the fact that you've stuck with me and hear my insights on Oversoul embodiment. In the meantime, catch you next week. Send you all my love.